Today we're going to look at market structures and what role they play in production decisions. Now, market structures play a very vital role in predicting how firms set prices, how much product will be produced, and then how many choices we'll have as consumers. So that's going to be in terms of like product options, features, and quality. So market structures are going to be very important in determining if and how the government will regulate any industry. Now, there are thousands of industries in the United States, and even though each industry is unique in its own way, industries share enough similarities that economists tend to group them into these four basic market structures, and that's going to be perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopolies, and monopolies. Now, perfect competition and monopolies are going to be our two extremes, and we're going to spend the remainder of the semester kind of focusing on those. But when we talk about monopolistic competition, this means that there's many firms that sell differentiated products. So they sell differentiated products. So some examples of monopolistic competition could be your clothing stores. So I'm trying to think of any brands like Express or Hollister, Abercrombie and Fitch, whatever else it might be. So your clothing stores are restaurants. You have like your McDonald's, your Burger Kings, Arby's. You have Hardee's, things like that. So there's going to be many firms, and they're going to sell what we call differentiated products, and we'll explain what differentiated products mean in just a moment. And then we also have oligopolies. Now, oligopolies means that there's going to be fewer firms that sell identical or these differentiated products, but there's going to be low ease of entry. So it's not really easy to get into these markets. So that could be car manufacturers, so your Ford, it could be Chrysler. So there's a few of those types of firms, and they sell identical or they can sell differentiated products. So you might believe that one car is better than another. And once again, there's going to be very low ease of entry. So it's not going to be really easy to enter into these markets. Now, if we have it on a spectrum here, we're going to have perfect competition at one end. Then we get to monopolistic competition, oligopolies, and then at the other end of the spectrum, it's going to be monopolies. And what we'll see is that the further that we go along the spectrum here, the least amount of firms that there is going to be. So I'm pretty sure you've already gathered that when we talk about monopolies, that just means that there's one firm in the market. So that firm is actually the market. So just one seller. And like I said, we'll get to that in another lecture video. So let's talk about the four primary factors. Now, each industry also has four key characteristics that we're going to highlight to help place them into one of these four market structures. And we'll talk mostly this semester about perfect competition and monopolies, which are going to be our two extremes. So let's look at the first key characteristic. The first key characteristic is going to be the number of firms in the industry. So the number of firms in the industry. And we refer to this as the degree of competitiveness. So how competitive is the actual industry? And typically, the more firms that are operating in the industry is going to generate more competition, so more competitive. And that's why perfect competition is going to be the most competitive market structure, and then monopolies here with only one firm in the market is going to be the least competitive market structure. Now, our second key characteristic is going to be the degree of product standardization. Now, when we talk about product standardization, we're just looking at the similarity of the goods or services that are being produced. So, as it says here, how similar are the competing goods or services within the industry? And then how similar is going to be based on actual product attributes So such as the function, size, color, packaging, and warranty. Whenever I'm describing like the actual product attributes, I think of like a car. So if we're looking at a Toyota Camry, so we're going to see that it could be a four-door Camry. It could be a red four-door Camry. It could be a red four-door Camry that comes with an extended warranty. Or we can look at actual product features that come with that. It could be a rear view camera. It could be the Bluetooth hookup for your music. It could be self-parking. All those things are going to be actual product attributes. So things that can't be denied with that product. Now, we're going to compare that with these perceived product attributes. Now, perceived product attributes, these are going to be based on comparisons in a sense. We're going to call it like there's no really tangible way to assess this. So that's why we have attributes such as quality, style, the advertising, or the brand reputation. So the example that I usually hear is that Apple phones are better quality than Samsung phones. So once again, that's going to be a perceived product attribute. So there's no way to prove that true or false. Those are all going to be based on subjectivity. Now, based on these comparisons, we're going to classify goods as identical or standardized, unique, or differentiated. These are going to be our three product or our three product types. So they could be identical goods, they could be unique goods, or they could be differentiated. Now, when we talk about identical goods means that there are no actual differences, and consumers perceive there not to be any differences between the two products or services. So in this case, they are identical in every aspect. So whenever consumers view all products as identical, they're going to make their decision based solely on the lowest price. So you can probably think of some goods that you consider to be identical. For me, let's say if you're going to go buy milk, you can view all 2% milk as the exact same. So if I believe that Great Value and Dean's Milk and Prairie Farms Milk are all identical goods, if I'm at Walmart, I'm going to make my decision on the 2% milk that I buy based on whichever one is the cheapest if I view them all as identical. So once again, identical goods mean that there are no actual differences and consumers perceive there to be no differences between the two products. So these are our identical goods. Next, we have differentiated. Our differentiated goods. Now, whenever we talk about differentiated goods, this means that consumers perceive differences. So consumers perceive that there's differences whether there are or not. So in such cases, we're going to see that consumers are going to consider price as one of the factors in their decision-making process. Other factors such as style, brand reputation, service, etc. play a role. So once again, these are going to be some of those subjective measures that go into your decision. So example that I like to use for like differentiated goods are Pepsi versus Coke. So even though that I might think that they taste the same, for someone else, they might believe that Pepsi is better than Coca-Cola. Or when you're looking at computers or sandwiches at restaurants, so those products can be differentiated. Now, once again, when we are dealing with differentiated products, those other factors other than just the price are going to play into a consumer's decision to buy that good or service. And then our last type of product is going to be unique products. Now, unique products are such that there are no close substitutes in the marketplace. So no close substitutes in the marketplace. So the example given here is like electricity. There's really not a close substitute for electricity. Now, our third key characteristic is going to be the barriers to entry or exit. Now, barriers by definition are going to be these obstacles, and we're going to look at natural and legal, which makes it difficult for a new firm to enter a market and compete against existing firms. Now, the degrees of barrier to entry and exit is going to be very important as we're determining the market structure. Now, as we talk about these natural barriers, these could be things such as high startup costs. So that's going to be a significant natural barrier to entry. We can also look at the existence of a dominant firm already producing or supplying for most of the industry or most of the market. Existence of a dominant firm supplying most of the market. Now, the existence of a dominant firm supplying most of the market is going to be considered a barrier to entry because they benefit from what we call economies of scale. So this occurs when production of greater quantities of the good lead to lower per unit costs, as we looked at costs in our last chapter. So with lower per unit costs for production, we're going to see that firms are going to be able to price their products a lot cheaper. So new firms with relatively low output are going to kind of find it difficult to compete because their average costs will be higher than these existing firms benefiting from economies of scale. So the prospect of higher average costs may deter entry for a lot of firms if there's already an existent dominant firm in that industry. Now, looking at legal barriers, that could be things such as licenses, which are certifications allowing access to a market. So in case I wanted to be a pharmacist, I can't go behind the counter of Walmart right now and start mixing up prescriptions. I need a license or a certification in order to do so. So that could be considered a legal barrier. So something that's preventing people from entering into the market and competing against existing firms. It can also be patents. Now, patents are ownership of a product design preventing duplication for the life of the patent. So that's going to be considered a legal barrier because you can't duplicate that design. And then lastly, we have copyrights. So this could be ownership of artistic work. So the exclusive legal right is going to be given to an originator or an assignee to print, publish, perform, film, or even record literary, artistic, or musical material, and to authorize others to do the same. So if I wanted to start a t-shirt business selling shirts with with Mickey Mouse on there, I can't do that because that would be copyright infringement. And then our fourth key characteristic is going to be market power. Market power. Now, market power is going to be the ability of a firm, so the ability of one firm to influence the market price. So in order to influence the market price, you need to control enough of the market that the individual's firm's supply decision actually impacts the overall market price. So those are 4 key characteristics. We're going to look at the number of firms in the industry. We're going to look at the degree of product standardization, so how similar are the products. We're going to look at the degrees of barriers to entry or exit. And lastly, we're going to look at market power. So let's start with perfect competition. Now, perfect competition is going to be the most competitive market structure, and it's going to be through which the industry naturally finds the market equilibrium price and quantity, and therefore we're going to see that an optimal allocation of resources are going to be achieved. So the key takeaway when we're looking at perfect competition is it's going to be the most efficient out of the 4 market structures, the 4 main market structures, that's to say. Now, because of this, consumers are going to get the lowest possible price, the highest quality, and this industry structure is going to be considered the benchmark for analysis of all the other industry types that we're going to be looking at. So let's look at some of the characteristics of perfect competition. So we looked at the first one that we talked about is going to be the number of firms in the market. Now, whenever we're talking about perfect competition, there are going to be many buyers and many sellers. So there's going to be a high number of competing firms in this market. And we have many small firms, each constituting a small portion of the overall market. So since there are many buyers and sellers, once again, each one has only a small impact on the market price and output. So you can think of it as like if you're a farmer, the yield of your farm compared to the yield of the entire United States. So that's how we can kind of tell. So when we look at perfect competition, for our first key characteristics, there's going to be many buyers and many sellers. Now, our second key characteristic is going to be we talked about the degree of product standardization. So, with perfect competition, they sell standardized or identical products. And once again, this is going to be in both actual and perceived attributes. So, identical products. Now, we talked about with identical products that consumers are going to base their decision based solely on price. So base their decision solely on price. Now, in perfect competition, there are no significant barriers to entry or exit. So it's going to be easy, in a sense, for new firms to enter into the market and compete against others. Now, there may be some small, insignificant barriers, but nothing significant enough to keep new firms from entering the market and competing. So there might be some licenses or some startup costs, but once again, nothing too drastic. Now, when barriers to entry are low, new firms are going to be free to compete with existing businesses, which ensures that existence of competitive markets in those low prices. And then also, this is one of the reasons why typically we would say that agriculture would be a perfectly competitive industry, but for this reason, like the barriers to entry, that's one of the main reasons why agriculture is kind of moving away from perfectly competitive market due to the increase in equipment cost and land costs. So our fourth key characteristic, we talked about market power. When we look at firms in a perfectly competitive market, they have absolutely no market power. And we consider these firms to be price takers. Because essentially they're going to set their price at whatever the market dictates. So a price taker has no control over the price set by the market. It takes or accepts the price determined from the overall supply and demand conditions that are going to regulate the market. So once again, we see that an individual firm's actions have no impact on the market price because each firm is so small relative to the overall market size, which causes them to have to adopt the market price, and that's why we consider them to be price takers. So let's look at perfect competition a little bit further. All right. So when we look at market 12 for perfect competition, let me show you how the market price that each firm charges is set. So let's say that we're in the market for corn. We know that price is on a vertical axis, quantity is on the horizontal axis. Now we're going to be looking at the industry, and then we're going to look at an individual firm. So let's say that this graph here on the left is going to represent the industry for corn. And this one on the right is going to represent an individual firm. And let's say that the name, let's say this is my farm. I'm going to call my business the Corn King. So we're going to see that the price in the market for corn is going to be determined through the interactions of demand and supply. So let's say that the equilibrium price is going to be $3.50. And for this market, 1 million units of corn are going to be sold. So, based off of that information, let's look at what it's going to, or how it's going to appear for the individual firm as a result of the interactions of demand and supply. So for this individual firm, we're going to see that their demand curve is going to be a horizontal line at whatever the market price is. So they're going to always set their price at whatever the market price is. Now, since this price is going to be constant, we know that the price is going to be equal to the marginal revenue. So for my individual firm here, the Corn King, and once again, this is perfectly competitive industry, so I'm one of many sellers in my area that sells corn. So what do you think would happen if I try to raise the price? Well, if I try to raise the price, I'm not going to sell anything because consumers will switch to buying the product from firms, well, from my competitors. So therefore, the firm, which is going to be myself, I'll have to charge the same price as every other firm in the market. So we have the demand curve, which represents the price and the marginal revenue. And we also have our marginal cost curve. So once again, this is going to be my marginal cost for my firm, the Corn King. Now I'm going to be able to find my profit maximizing output where my price crosses this marginal cost curve, which is right here. And let's say that that's 175 units. So this is going to represent my Q star, or my profit maximizing output level. So once again, one of the key takeaways is that the demand curve, whenever we're dealing with a perfectly competitive firm, is always going to be this horizontal line at whatever the market price is. So just remember that we said that for consumers in a perfectly competitive market, they're going to be perfectly elastic. So the demand curve is always going to be this horizontal line. Now, one of the other key takeaways is that for perfectly competitive firms, that price is equal to our marginal revenue. And this will make a little bit more sense once we start looking at some of these tables and looking at determining the profit maximizing output level that way. So for perfectly competitive firms, price is always going to be equal to your marginal revenue. Now, firms are going to be able to maximize. So for perfectly competitive firms will maximize profit at the quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal costs. So firms are going to maximize profit at the quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal costs. Now, for us in these perfectly competitive markets, remember we said that price is going to be equal to our marginal revenue. So for perfectly competitive firms, we can say that they're going to operate where price is equal to marginal costs. Okay? So this is going to be key. You'll always be able to find your profit maximizing output level by looking at where the price is equal to your marginal costs. Now, in the short run, and we'll be dealing mostly with the short run in this class, we're going to see that firms can earn profits, they can earn losses, or they can break even. So in short run, firms can earn profits, loss, or break even. So, and that's what's in the notes. So we talked about the shutdown rule. Now, if firms are losing money, they must apply the shutdown rule. So firms are losing money, they should apply the shutdown rule. And in the notes we talked about the shutdown rule, meaning that if you can cover your variable costs, then you should continue to operate. But if you cannot cover your variable costs, you should shut down. Now in the long run, this is where more of a visionary phase where firms can change every aspect of their business. All firms are going to break even due to the no barriers to entry or exit. So all firms are going to break even due to there being no barriers to entry or exit. So let me highlight that. So once again, I'll use my example of the corn market. So this is the industry for corn. And then we'll have my individual firm. Once again, my company is called the Corn King. And let's say that the price is $3.50. And I believe we said that we were selling 1 million units. So if the market price determined through the interactions of demand and supply is $3.50, then that means that I'm going to charge $3.50 as well as the Corn King. So my market price is going to be $3.50. And that's going to be a horizontal line. Then we also have in our marginal cost curve. And I'm going to also add in our average total cost curve, so that we can calculate the profits that I'm earning from my business as the Corn King. All right, so let's say that I'm selling 150 units, because remember, we'll always be able to find our profit maximizing output. So Q star is equal, or you can find it where price is equal to our marginal cost, which occurs right here. So at $3.50 and 150 units. Now we can also calculate the profit that I'm making by looking at this average total cost. So if I'm producing 150 units and the average total cost of producing those 150 units is $2.50, we can use this formula, profit is equal to the price minus your average total cost times quantity. Because your price represents your revenue per unit, average total cost represents your cost per unit, and then if we multiply it times the amount of units that we're selling, that should give us our overall profit. Now, the other way that you could find it is looking at profit is equal to total revenue minus our total cost. But that'll take an extra step. So let's just do price minus average total cost times our quantity. Now, if the price is going to be equal to $3.50, our average total cost are $2.50, and our quantity is 150. 350 minus 250 is going to give us 1 times 150 is going to be equal to 150. Now let's say that this is, instead of just 150, this is $150,000. So if I'm making a profit, So this is in thousands of dollars. So I'm making a profit of $150,000. Now, if firms are earning profits in the short run, and let me write this over here. I'll continue this down here. So if firms are earning profits in the short run, what we're going to see is that this is going to cause more firms to enter into the market. So with no barriers to entry, new firms are going to enter into the market. So I always use this example. I say that if I'm the Corn King and I'm making all this extra money, I'm going to go around and spend my money buying me a red Lamborghini, and I'll put Corn King on the license plate. Or actually, I should make it a yellow Lamborghini for the color of corn. So a yellow Lamborghini, and I'm going to put Corn King on the license plate, and I'll be driving around the city that I'm operating in. Now, people are going to start asking themselves, how is he making so much money? And they're going to say, well, selling corn. Now, if people are recognizing that I'm making so much money from selling corn and there's no barriers to entry, then this is going to entice more people to enter into the market. So as more firms enter into the market, we're going to see that that's going to lead to a rightward shift of our supply curve. Going back to our chapter 3, we said that anytime new firms enter the market, that increases the supply. So as we have this new supply curve, we're going to have to find our new equilibrium price and quantity. And it's going to be where this new supply curve intersects our existing demand curve. And let's say that drives the prices down. And drives our equilibrium quantity up. So once again, with no barriers to entry, new firms are going to enter the market, and this increases supply. Now, as supply goes up, we see that our equilibrium price goes from $3.50 to $2.50. So our equilibrium price goes down, and we see that our equilibrium quantity goes up as a result. As the industry expands. Now, remember, since I'm a price taker, I'm going to set my price at whatever the market dictates. So if now the price is $2.50 in the industry, then that's what I'm going to charge. So price switch. So once again, that's going to reduce my profits. So with no barriers to entry, new firms are going to enter the market. So we said that that's going to cause an increase in supply, which drives down the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. As the equilibrium price goes down, then the amount that I charge is going to go down as well. So the increased competition will continue to lower the price. And every time that the price gets lowered, that reduces the profits. So let's look at what happens if firms are earning losses in the short run. So we'll have our industry over here on the left. So we have corn, and then we have my individual firm, Corn King. And we had the market price set at $3.50. with 1 million units being sold. So then if I am a price taker for my individual firm, I'm also going to charge the $3.50. I'll have in my marginal cost curve. And then I'll also add in my average total cost curve. And we'll be able to find, once again, our profit maximizing output level where the marginal revenue intersects our marginal cost curve, which is right here. And let's say that that was 150 units. Now we can go ahead and find our profit using that formula. Profit is equal to price minus our average total cost times quantity. With the price being, well, first let's find our average total cost. So if we're producing 150 units, let's say that our average total cost is going to be, let's put it right at $4. So price was $3.50. Our average total cost of producing 150 units is $4. And our quantity is 150 units. So 350 minus 4 is going to give us negative 0.5. And once again, we're producing 150 units. So the profit is going to be equal to negative 75. Now recall we said that we're going to be having these in increments of thousands. So we have negative $75,000, which means that I'm losing $75,000 by continuing to operate. So if firms are earning losses in the short run, and we're assuming that my firm's not the only firm earning losses, so each firm is going to have to apply that shutdown rule. And for some firms, it might be beneficial for them to shut down. So if firms are earning losses in the short run with no barriers to exit, some firms will shut down. Now, when firms shut down, they're essentially exiting the market. So when firms leave the market, that's going to cause supply to go down. So anytime we have a decrease in supply, that's going to be a leftward shift of our supply curve. So we have a leftward shift of our supply curve representing that decrease in supply. And we'll find our new equilibrium. Our new equilibrium price is going to be $4. Our equilibrium quantity, let's go down to 150,000. Now with this new price, so as supply decreases, we see that our equilibrium price has gone up and our equilibrium quantity has decreased as a result of firms exiting the market. Now this reduced competition is going to increase prices for everybody else who's still remaining in the industry. And by increasing the prices, that's also going to reduce losses, because we'll see that at the price of $4 for the market, well, then I'm going to start charging $4 for every ear of corn that I sell. So this is going to be our new marginal revenue curve. And we're going to see that we're going to find our new point, our new equilibrium. So my new profit maximizing output is going to be where this new price and marginal revenue curve intersects my existing marginal cost curve. Let's say that that's at 175 units. And we also see that that's going to be where our average total cost is. So supply decreases, once again, in the reduced competition. So the reduced competition will continue to increase prices and reduce losses until no losses remain. So once again, in the long run, we see that all firms are going to break even due to there being no barriers to entry or exit.